Okay, so my final recording for the project, we're given an open topic, and I wanted to talk about specifically my experiences of being in the situations I was, being a psychologist, being a therapist myself. There's things about this that I've alluded to in my other videos, but it feels like it's worth recognising in itself. See, as a clinical psychologist, certainly in my training, I don't think that there are any UK clinical psychology training courses where it's mandatory to undertake your own therapy. I may be wrong in that, but that's certainly what I believe to be the case. And in my training, they were good about the idea that you might do therapy, and they were good about the talking about where it could be available and so on. But there isn't, in my experience, a professional expectation that you'll have been through that. I think that the way I see this is that it goes along with a certain professional identity. I think psychology can lead towards of a confidence that leads into overconfidence, that leads into possible arrogance, that because to do ClinPsych you have to be very academically strong in that sense. And I think that we overestimate, in my opinion, how much our academic understanding of human distress can be relied upon for informing our work with other people in distress, with people in distress. To me, there's something, as I've already said, having been a psychologist was incredibly helpful for me in my recovery from where I was. I've done a lot of reflective practice. I had a really good idea about myself and about my inner psychological workings. But it was a very conceptual, it was a very cognitive, it was a very academic understanding of myself. I have written myself out as a case study in any number of ways. I had never really appreciated the emotional connection. I'd never explored that to the full degree of what all of that formulation of my family background and my family relationships and my experiences and how they all came together to inform who I was now. I hadn't ever really taken that into the depth of emotion, and I'll acknowledge it. That could have actually been a failing in myself as a trainee and a subsequent psychologist, that I hadn't done that, and maybe I've not quite embraced reflective opportunities and supervision in the way that other people do. But I suspect not. I kind of think that's something about the profession, and I, having now been in the depths of how strongly you can be overtaken by these feelings, by these experiences, it's kind of made me think that I think that all psychologists possibly should be have an experience of therapy at some point. I think that, like in so many other areas of psychotherapy, it possibly should be part of the core expectation of clinical psychology training. Because it was actually, as I've said in my other videos, it was through the process of knowing that I was going to access therapy that actually unlocked a lot of these things for me. I think if I hadn't made that decision, some of this would have just carried on and on and on, and I'm not sure I would have necessarily come to the depths I would have done, but I'd have continued in this not very harmful or healthy or helpful kind of way of thinking about myself and about my world. And so I've got a belief, having been through it, that actually I've got a greater depth of awareness of myself, having been through therapy, than I ever had done, because for all that very comprehensive formulation I had of myself, the really significant bit that was missing was some of the emotional connectedness. I don't think I could draw that emotional connectedness until I'd allowed myself to experience it, and I didn't allow myself to experience it because of all these defences I put up around me, which I knew about, and this is the thing, I knew about some of those defences, but knowledge isn't enough in itself. I think it's about being able to let yourself pass those defences, which is an intense thing to do, which can't happen in a reflective practice group, which isn't actually the purpose of supervision, to the extent that you do in therapy, and which I think, having been through there, I believe actually makes me better as a therapist, or can make me better as a therapist. And that's not to subscribe to the idea that you can only help someone if you've been through what they've been through. I don't believe that, because I believe that everybody is so individual that if you take that to its logical conclusion, no one can help anyone, and that's a nihilistic view that I simply cannot accept. Also because I think that there's a lot about the human relations and relationships that any kind of therapy can work on. But I do think that for all, I believe I've always worked with a sense of actively trying to hold compassion and empathy for people and what they were going through. I think that what I've now been through, having been through therapy myself, enhances that. I feel a lot stronger in that, and I wish I'd been there more. Of course, the question with that then is, would that have made any difference? I've been qualified 10 years, literally. I've just recently passed the anniversary of my 10th year that I qualified. Worked for 5 years as a trainee and an assistant psychologist before then. Would I have done anything hugely different in any of my casework, any of the people I've worked with over those years? I don't know. And that in itself is the reason then to go, or why advocate therapy? I just think that there may have just been one or two ways in which somehow that shared understanding of what some people were going through might have given something a little bit different. I've always been quite a strong advocate of trying to, I hate the way that services that I have been involved in have waiting lists and managing things, all that kind of stuff. I've always tried to take a service user focus as strongly as possible and try to advocate that changes where I've had power to do so. Would I have done it more if I'd been on the end of things that I have done? Possibly. I might not have rested as I may have simply not rested about it. I think I've always advocated, but perhaps I haven't. Perhaps I wouldn't have ever rested until I'd achieved what I wanted to, in that sense. Would I have done assessments different? I've been in a situation now where suddenly I really know how it is to believe and to know in yourself that your life is not worth living, and that the better thing for the world is for you to not be there, for you to die. Now I've probably had over 100 times when I've had some kind of assessment of somebody's self-harm or concerns around suicidality. And I believe the way I've approached those, and I believe the decisions I've made. There's nothing about what I've been through now that makes me worried that I have made bad decisions in any of those, or wrong decisions. I think I've always acted in best faith, and I believe that that's as best as I could do, I had the right outcome for those people. But I do, for that aspect in particular, I do really think that having been there would have given me that different insight into what people might be thinking. And I think just that full awareness, again, I had a conceptual awareness that it's not about rational decision making and all of that kind of stuff. That's not how things work. I always knew that. But now I've really experienced that. And I think that I probably wish I'd had that in those assessments and at those times. Yeah. So I suppose I'd end this one with just really wanting to encourage people who aren't sure about it and people who are tempted to go on the argument of, no, it's better not to go for therapy and so on. But actually, I, having now been a psychologist for 10 years, wish that I'd been through therapy over 10 years ago. And I think that might have made me a little bit of a better psychologist, as well as the fact that it would have undoubtedly helped me to not get to where I did get to.